how pieces will come together, the notion of yogification. And I think today the idea is to first go a little bit into what the outcome of that would look like. I think that was the question: what happens to the various gunas, to the koshas? What's really happening at the end of it? So as we think of yogification and this simple, uh, so what really is happening at these three levels, right? So at the kosha level, between our anna, prana, man, which is the field, right, and the trigun. So essentially, these three, the kosha, the triguna, and the pluralities, the diversity of life, as we see it, that's the field in which the operation is happening. So what happens to the kosha? So koshas come into alignment. What do we mean by alignment? That they start working together in sync. Yeah. So what happens sometimes today, if you notice some people, they will be nodding their heads, but in their mind, it's not that they are agreeing to it, it's just listening, right? So our body is saying something, our mind is saying something else. So our mind, our prana, our body, they are not in sync all the time. So what happens through the process of yogification, more and more of this happens. A lot of times, some people gesticulate a lot and some don't at all. There is no body movement. While their mind is going at a different speed, their body is moving at a different speed. So during this process, these three systems come into alignment. So it becomes what the mind says, instructs, is happening in the mind, flows through the prana to the different parts of the body. And also vice versa. That is, the signals of the body go to the mind very smoothly, and the mind is able to accept them, absorb them, and take it from there. So that happens at the kosha level, alignment. So that's the key word. At the triguna level, what happens is more of an equilibrium, moves more and more towards a state of balance, state of equilibrium. So what is happening right now when we are aswast, then there is less control. So they are moving on their own. There is dominance of some when it is not required. So rajas dominates when we don't want it to. So our mind says, I shouldn't express my anger if I am angry, but it happens. Sometimes we just feel helpless. It's not in our control because just the overload is so high that it has to be expressed, for example. Right? So that balance starts coming in more and more. And it is then natural through yogification that, as we saw yesterday, the guna that primarily predominates in the Vijnanmay Kosh and in our Swa, it's actually Sattva. So the evolution, the ways evolution happened is there was Sattva, from Sattva, Rajas and Tamas come. And then with the activation power of Rajas, the creation starts happening. So as we involve, as we start the process of yogification towards yoga, the journey, more and more sattva will start happening. So you will feel lighter also in the body. So the more sattva will start expressing in that way. You'll feel light, just physically light. It will be more buoyant. Your energy will be like illuminating. It will become that way naturally. For that, the tamas and rajas have to go out. It's not through suppression. And that's the tricky thing with Triguna, that tamas and sattva look very alike in most things. So if you see in nature also, extremes look alike. When we look at the light frequency, there is an infrared and there is an ultraviolet. There is less frequency we can't see, high frequency we can't see. There's a band where we see, right? So the extremes look very similar. They will at first, but it's only through our internal introspection we will know how they are different. So we'll see their seamless movement and more of sattva emerging as yogification happens. And what happens to the pluralities of life? You will start seeing they will start converging more and more, right? So as you see on the right, the different things will first converge to dualities. You will start seeing, okay, good, bad, right, wrong. You'll start classifying that way. Today we classify into so many, we've gotten into this sub-classification of, oh, the grays, the shades of gray have become the thing, but you'll start seeing the the dualities first, the right, wrong, and then the dualities will also yogify. So as you see here, the dualities will also start yogifying. Pleasure, pain, action, inaction, all will start, success, failure. They'll start looking similar and similar until they start coming into these one subjective experience of yogification as the first thing. They will start emerging that. So we'll start seeing emotions, all emotions. It won't be good and bad. First is we'll start seeing good and bad emotions. And then they'll start just seeing as emotions in some way. And we'll move towards closer and closer to yogification. So in short, the other way, this was more of a description of how it will come from outside in, but inside out, what will start happening? So as this happens, our connection to our cosmic intelligence starts getting established, and our life becomes an expression of Swa. So what Swa wants to express, that starts happening in the field. So it starts becoming what the field, so we'll stop getting influenced by the field, what is happening from the external to our internal. It'll start becoming our internal expressing out into the world. So it will be an expression of that. And we have many examples of those, right? So most discoveries are that way, right? It's through the cosmic intelligence, then be it scientific like Newton, Einstein, etc., or be it poetry like Rabindranath Tagore, etc., Keats, anywhere. So then the expression becomes the expression of Swa, and that is what then lives, right? So all our scriptures have come from that expression where they have being able to connect with the cosmic intelligence, and then they still express it in the material world, right? It is a painting, a song, a scripture, right? It finally comes in a material form, but it is the other way. So matter is important, but it's not where things start from. That's the key difference in this process. So I think this is theoretical. To just make it a little real, I'll share at least my journey a little bit with this. So when I started the process, that was about now more than 12 years ago. It started with like having hyperacidity, where at one stage, my kosha had reached a point that if I ate after 8 o'clock, I couldn't sleep. There would just be so much acidity, GERD, reflux coming. I just couldn't lie down. And when I was working in a corporate then, and when I spoke to my senior, he said, yeah, I had the same problem, and since the last 5 years, I have been popping these 2 pills every day for GERD, and you should do the same and continue. And I was like, no, in my 20s, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not going to live my life by eating 2 pills every day. And you can see at that point, in acidity is an expression of over rajas. It's fire, right? It's activation. So it's just over rajas is happening. And I didn't understand all this. I'm just trying to, and then what I moved to, and I couldn't eat like even a little bit of red chili powder in food, and I couldn't take it, right? It was just so sensitive. And so I went to this yoga ashram in Bangalore, Vyasa, stayed there for 2 weeks, started this journey, learned the practices, and it was amazing. So when I went, many things happened, right? So in those 2 weeks itself, so many things happened. I couldn't run. I was a sports person, but I couldn't even run now 100 meters when I went. That's the level things had gone down to in some ways, and without realizing what was happening, till that wake up call came, and I couldn't run 100 meters. I couldn't do anything. I was just at 8, as I said. After that, I couldn't eat. And in those 2 weeks, when I came back, one of the side effects was that I lost 10 kgs of weight, and people just couldn't recognize me. They said, who are you? In these 2 weeks, the person who has come back. But more importantly, without doing anything, I didn't realize it there. But when I came back, I said, okay, let me start running again. And the first time I ran after 2 weeks, I could run 10 kilometers in less than an hour on a treadmill. I was surprised at myself, like what had changed in those 2 weeks itself with that magic. And it was really magical that how and the good thing was those 2 weeks were dedicated time. I think that's the struggle. So after that, I have fallen back on, etc., till finding the rhythm to stay more and more in daily life. How do we stay there? then went on to do triathlon now. So my health has, obviously the physical aspect has changed quite a bit. It's gotten me more interested. So mentally it's become more stable. So I remember at that time, I used to get angry very easily, like at work, be it team, client, or there was a lot of fights that were happening. I think it's gotten a lot more peaceful mentally, gotten me interested into reading this, getting more centered, anchored in who I am. And that journey has continued. So it's led from one thing to the other. And it's been 12 years and it's still on. So it's a journey which doesn't also get done in a hurry, but it starts showing you signs very quickly. And if you are ready to listen to the koshas, you'll start seeing trigunas. It becomes more and more. So peacefulness, for example, is a sign of sattva. So you start seeing that happening, and life becomes simpler because the pluralities are getting converged. You start seeing things more clearly, I would say. That starts happening. So yeah, that's my journey to give a sense of how these things play out. So there will be changes in the koshas and the triguna. They go together in a lot of ways. That's the field, and one influences the other. Yes. And I think along with this, as this yogification is happening and the pluralities are getting one, what does that mean? And I think, to summarize, just going back to yesterday's, like the first thought, I just want to say yoga is both the journey as well as the outcome. In the text, it's both. It's yoga is about being in it in every day and continuing that journey through the process of yoga to reach yoga. That's how it literally is. And I think we'll talk more about the process. Uh, so just to simplify, what we have done is we've called the journey as yogification in our. So we just created a word in some ways which we understand a little from English to make it simpler. Otherwise, it could be confusing initially. But as, from a standpoint of purity, it is both the journey and the destination. What does the destination look like? Just again to reiterate, it is where everything finally is united, just by definition. So the pluralities do become dualities to one subjective experience, to one the experience of the soul. It is where everything is united, every being is united. So it's thing being, it's not just life, it's all matter, everything is united. It is a state of oneness, and it is a state of onlyness. So the only thing that is there, that's onlyness. There's only you, I, or everything. It's the same. And of course, this is not coming from personal experience yet. It's coming from scripture. So I'm just repeating that. And there are obviously people who have realized this. And hence, they have also described it differently. They have used different words to describe this similar experience. And sometimes the descriptions are also different. So that's the outcome of yoga. I'll hand over to Garima.